Well, hello again, my friends and fellow Invisibles. Yes, we've done it. We've come right through. This is going to be the last of my series of lectures on the book of Revelation, which I started a couple of years ago. It's been a long journey, hasn't it? But this is episode 26, during which we're going to be covering the chapter 22. There's some extra lectures in here in the series because some chapters needed more than one lecture. And I've also actually got an episode 0 as well, so it's actually 27 lectures. That's on the who was St. John, who wrote the book. And I slotted that one in as, and I'd already started my numbering, so I put that in as number 0, because I think it's important to know who was giving us this book and what we know about him. Anyway, without more ado, let's press on and we'll get into episode 26, Apocalypse of John, and the River and Tree of Life. So, chapter 22 of Revelation begins. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And that's Revelation 22, 1 to 3. And that's what we're going to focus on in this lecture. I recommend that you read the whole of the book of Revelation, if you haven't done already. Chapter 22 is actually quite short, but this is the gist of it. This is the most important part, and that's what we're going to be discussing in this lecture. So, in a way, the New Jerusalem is a recreation of the Garden of Eden. And why do I say that? Well, a garden, what you have to think what a garden is, a walled garden in particular, is a place, a sanctuary, is a place of special high, well, not necessarily sacredness in the case of an ordinary garden, but purity and order. It's a place that you would keep organized. You would keep out the weeds. You plant delicate things that need protection. And that's what a garden is for, a walled garden. And if you ever go and visit a decent garden that someone's lovingly cared for, that's what you find. You find it's a place of refinement, a place where that which wouldn't be able to survive outside of the garden has given sanctuary and looked after. So that's how I want you to see this New Jerusalem and how it represents perhaps a recreation of the Garden of Eden. Its 4 rivers, which run to the 4 directions of north, south, east and west, are like the rivers of Eden. And if you read again in your book of Genesis, the story of Adam and Eve and Eden, Eden has 4 rivers running out of it. 2 of them are the Tigris and Euphrates. I forget what the other 2 are called. I think one might be the Oxus, I'm not sure. But anyway, it has 4 rivers running out of it, watering the rest of the world from outside of the river, outside of the garden. And you can see a river coming out from a door there, when this man's standing in it up to his ankles. So it is, in a sense, I think, this is a Rosicrucian print from a book by a guy called Michael Mayer, who lived in the 17th century, and he was a Rosicrucian. So it's representing, I think, his version of the Garden of Eden and what it means to be outside of it and to want to go back in, and it's all bolted and barred. But I'm not here to talk about that particular drawing. I just put it in there because I thought it might sort of represent things quite well for us, for what we're talking about today. Those outside the gates can only wonder at the blessings within. Some water flows out from under the door, but the garden itself is on a higher level. To understand what is written here, I'm going to make use of the teachings brought to Britain by P.D. Uspensky in the aftermath of World War I. The system of ideas that he taught originated from his teacher, G.I. Gurdjieff, an Armenian Greek from the Caucasus. Now, Gurdjieff is a very interesting man who wandered widely in the Middle East areas, looking for a secret brotherhood he calls the Samun Brotherhood, which he tells us was Christian or some kind of esoteric Christian. And I have actually traced what I think this Samun Brotherhood was. I think it was the descendants of the school of Edessa, or Edessa is now called Sanliurfa in Turkey. And this brotherhood or order were thrown out by the orders of the Emperor Zeno because they were considered heretics. And they went eastwards and they settled in a place called Nisibis or Nisivis, which is now called Nusebin. And I've been there as well. But I talked about that in other places. But anyway, I do believe there was this brotherhood, and I think that's what he was in search of. And he claimed to have made contact with it somewhere in the remotest part of Afghanistan, where they still had some kind of centre. But be that as it may, he brought to the West a system of teachings which I think are really the essence of Christianity, if properly understood. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, P.D. Uspensky, who studied with Gurdjieff for 4 years, from 1914 to 1918, wrote about his time with Gurdjieff and what he was taught in a rather famous book entitled In Search of the Miraculous. And again, I do recommend you read this book. A lot of it is pretty obscure, I have to say. It takes a lot of work if you're going to go into it with a sort of meticulousness that Uspensky does. But the basic ideas are actually quite simple. And if you look at them through the perspective of some of the lectures I've delivered, particularly in the college, you'll understand it much better. But I do recommend it as a starting off point, if nothing else, in your own quest for enlightenment. So it's a very interesting book and covers many subjects. However, its very core is a set of teachings concerning what Gurdjieff refers to as the ray of creation. My preferred term for what is in essence the same idea is the Logos doctrine. I should probably call it the Logos stream, but you'll understand why I make that distinction as we go on. Now, the ray of creation according to Gurdjieff. The core of Gurdjieff's system, at least as taught by Uspensky, is this diagram. So you've got a series of worlds or cosmoses. Gurdjieff likes to use this word cosmos, which means an ordered whole. To give you an example, your body is a cosmos, and so also is each cell in your body is a cosmos. It's an ordered whole. You could say that each organ in your body is a cosmos as an organized whole. So you have this series of organized wholes, and they're a bit like Russian dolls in the Gurdjieff-Uspensky system. They were both actually in the Russian Empire. Uspensky was born actually at Kharkiv, which is now in Ukraine, but he was a Russian, or he would certainly have claimed to have been. Gurdjieff was born in the Caucasus on the borders between Turkey and Russia, and he spent some time in each at different times. So he spoke both Turkish and Russian, as well as other languages. So anyway, you have this organized whole, absolute, all worlds, all suns, sun, all planets, earth, moon, and each system, you can call each cosmos a system, contains the ones below it. So the absolute contains everything. All worlds contains all suns, and all the suns contains the sun, and the sun contains all planets, and all planets contains the earth, and the earth contains, the earth system I should say, contains the moon. So there you have it. That's the ray of creation according to Uspensky. And it has a lot of, it's the core of Gurdjieff's teaching actually, when you get into it. It depicts how God creates the universe as a system of descending levels or worlds. There are 7 in all, making an octave. The sun sits in the middle. You can see there, it's the middle of the octave. And below it you have 3, and above it you have 3. This is his system. So our ray of creation, and I'm comparing it here to what we understand as the universe. In an earlier lecture I explained how the Logos, word or law of God, is carried by the breath of God, that's the Holy Ghost. Ghost or spirit means breath. So it's the holy breath from the absolute down to the lowest worlds of earth and moon. You have to understand that the breath carries the words, and the words are the logos, the logoi, but the word logos also means law. So the breath carries the laws, the orders, you could say, from God coming down through the systems to all the way down to the moon, and they're carried on the breath. And I've put here, you have the absolute, which is equivalent of Godhead. You have all worlds, which is the universe, all suns, which is the Milky Way galaxy. The sun, that's the heliosphere, and all the planets is the solar system, and then you have the earth and the moon. So we're right down near the bottom here. We're right at it, almost in the cold. Not as bad as being on the moon, but we're pretty near the bottom. So the descent of spirit is presented as a single ray of divine energy. So it comes down all the way down like an octave of music moving down a scale. And Gurdjieff uses music imagery a lot in his teachings. This is an equivalent of an octave or a scale coming down through the worlds. And actually the number of laws, and I don't want to make things too complicated, but they increase as you go down. They double at each level. You go 3, 6, 12, 24, 48. When you get down to the earth level, you're under 48 laws. It's more restrictive. The moon even more so, 96. So the further down the scale you go, the lower in rank you are, and the more restricted you are in your degrees of freedom. You have to obey more laws. So the ray of creation, this image I got here is actually a typical Catholic monstrance. They put the host in there, and they have various prayers worshipping it. But that's not why I put it here. I wanted you to see these rays coming out. So our solar system can be thought of as being positioned on the end of just one such ray. So you've got innumerable rays coming out, and there would be different rays of creation coming out in all directions. So only one of these rays leads down to our Earth, down to our solar system, our Earth and the moon. There's only one of those rays that's going to do that. But there's loads of other rays, an infinite number. And you can be sure that there are other sun systems, there are other Earths, there are other moons going out from this. And on some of them, they're going to have people as well. So you can be sure that we're not alone in this universe, not by a long shot. So our ray of creation looks like that. The question then is, what passes down the ray of creation? So what links these different worlds together? The higher cosmoses to the lower. And I said this is the Logos moving down. So the answer is given at the very start of St. John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, Logos in Greek, which also means law. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So it's identifying that this word is light. This Logos is light, and the light is also life. So the life force travels through the universe, comes out from the Godhead, travels through the universe, and we see it as light. And the light is actually what gives life, which we know. You only have to go out in your garden to see how life on this planet is sustained by the light, and the light comes from the sun. So the sun is giving us that life, but the sun itself is receiving that light in a higher form, and it's a kind of like a step-down transformer. But that's a whole other series of lectures I'm going to be doing on the electric universe. But you can understand that we're not talking airy-fairy here. We're talking about reality. We're talking about how all creation comes from the from the light. So all things were made through him. Now, the second person of the Trinity, the Christ, is considered to be the incarnation of that life stream. Now, that's what we believe in Christianity. It's because Jesus was merged, or he merged himself with the Logos. He was he linked his will with the will of the Father, the obedient Son. And that's why he's said to be the incarnation of the life stream. A very, very high level of being coming down here to rescue mankind. But as I say, that's a whole other discussion. Let's press on with what we have here. So, our ray of creation. In other words, the Logos, word or law of God, is the source of life, and it manifests as light. So you can say Logos equals life equals light. Emanating from the Godhead, it moves down the ray of creation. You can see that red arrow move down through the different levels of being, like Russian dolls, as I said, one contains the next, all the way down. And we know that the full spectrum of light is much greater than what we can see with our eyes. It stretches from ultra-short, high-intensity radiation that we call cosmic waves, through gamma and X-rays to ultraviolet, then visible light, infrared, microwaves, and then radio waves. And as you move from left to right in the spectrum, so the wavelengths get longer and the intensity is less. The energy carried by the waves are less. So each level of the ray of creation actually acts as a kind of transformer. And just as when you're transmitting electricity along power lines, it has to go through a series of transformers before it can be taken into your house. You know, as it comes out from the station where the electricity is being made or transformed, it comes out there at hundreds of thousands of volts, and it has to be placed well up in the air, away. It electrocute anyone who comes too near to it. It has to go through transformers to be stepped down, and in the end it comes down to 220 volts. For typical British or European house, it's 110 in America. They have a lower voltage there for historic reasons. But that's the equivalent of the wavelength getting longer and less powerful as you go down through the system. So we know that we could not go and stand on the sun. We could not take it. We have to be protected. We have to be within a protective environment which the earth supplies us with. But the earth can take it and the earth feeds off it. But we have to be protected. So exactly how this fits with the Logos doctrine goes outside of the present discussion. I will cover it in future lectures on the electric universe theory. So that's a whole other subject, and I will do another series on that in due course, at least for the people who are members of the college. Now, the tree of life, you can see it there on the right there, is often seen on Assyrian reliefs in the art of other ancient countries of the Near East. So there's lots of versions of this you can see in the British Museum and in other places, I think, probably in New York, in the Metropolitan Museum there. I'm not sure, but I bet they have got some as well. The Babylonians use the same imagery, and the Zoroastrians too. The Zoroastrians are the same people as the Magi who came to visit Jesus in the start of the Matthew Gospel, the wise men. And it's a very high religion. And a lot of Christianity actually is connected to both the Zoroastrian tradition as well as the Egyptian. And the Zoroastrian tradition is very strong on, for example, the idea of the 7 great archangels. That is directly linked to the Zoroastrian tradition rather more than the Jewish. Anyway, that's another thing. So they have this image of the sacred tree here. And that's also a very esoteric symbol. And I'm not going to go into the esotericism here of what they're talking about with this complex tree. But what I want you to see is the figure on top. Now, it has several meanings, but in general, it too symbolizes the ray of creation, or the creative force moving from level to level. Above it hovers the winged form of the Zoroastrian god of light, called Ahura Mazda, or Ormazd, by the Magi or Zoroastrians. He is the equivalent of God the Father, and the light comes from him. So that's why we used to have light bulbs called Mazda. I don't know if you remember that. If you're old enough, you might do, Mazda lights. That's because the light, Mazda gives out the light that shines in the darkness. And there's a constant battle between, in Zoroastrianism, between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu, the devil of dark. So there's a constant battle between light and dark. And we are sort of in the middle, caught in the middle of this battle. That's within the Zoroastrian teachings, which are themselves very interesting. In Kabbalah, a mystical form of Judaism, the tree of life is generally drawn like this. And you may well have seen that before. It's also known as Jacob's ladder, but the basic form is like this. And the tree stands between 2 pillars representing mercy and severity. Jachin and Boaz in the Bible, the 2 pillars that stand in front of the temple. And they represent the 2 extremes of mercy and severity. And true justice is the middle pillar, the balance between the 2. So you can be too merciful, which is actually what we're seeing with a lot of what's happening in America at the moment. Because they've not wanted to be severe in upholding the law, they're ending up with chaos there because they've been too merciful. It sounds weird to say that, but if you don't maintain the law and keep people to respect it, then there will be elements who will run amok and bring down your society. So you need a balance. You don't want to be too severe, otherwise you end up with a horrible dictatorship like China, where you can't do anything, and anyone who says the wrong thing gets thrown in jail. That's too much of the other pillar. You need the balance, the respect for law, that's represented by the middle pillar. So hanging on the tree are 10 spheres or lights. At the bottom of the central pillar is the earth. That's this one down here. They call it Malkuth. Above it is the moon, and that's this light here called Yesod. And above this is the sun, as Tiferet. The side pillars carry other lights. You've got the ones on one side and the others on the other, and I'm not going to go into those. They represent the planets. And at the top is the crown sphere, symbolizing the Godhead. Ketha means the crown. So that symbolizes the emanation from God that illuminates everything as it goes down. So it's again a link to the idea, not directly, but it's linked to the idea of the ray of creation, the energy coming down the pillar to the earth. In North European mythology, the tree of life is called Yggdrasil, the sacred ash tree. It spans the entire universe. At its top sits the eagle who sings a song of creation and destruction. You can see him there. And this tree grows around. Its branches, it splits and grows around. And that's like in the Revelation, the tree grows around the stream coming down the Logos. Gnawing at its roots as a serpent, whilst in its middle is Midgard. You often hear that called Middle Earth, but it actually means the middle garden. In Scandinavian languages, Gord, or we would call Gard, means an enclosed space, a garden. We derive the English word yard from that. You can call it the middle yard, if you like, but the guard or garden means a garden, and that's our earth in the middle bit, where live the children of men. And this was the Nordic equivalent of Eden. So you can think of this as being the earth in the middle there, the Garden of Eden. Here is another version of the same thing. You can see there the ash tree growing round and its branches and the earth in the middle. Note that Midgard is an island in the midst of the oceans. It has a serpent curled around the edge. The serpent there would be the moon. The moon is often represented as a serpent. Now, the New Jerusalem is also like the Garden of Eden, except there is no tree of knowledge of good and evil, and no serpent. Yeah, it is a garden. It's a protected space. What Jung would, C.G. Jung, he would call this a temenos. It's a protected space of high energy, high protection. Fine things can be nurtured here and protected from the wilderness outside. And like Eden, it has 4 rivers carrying water or life to the 4 quadrants, and they flow along the main roads in the book of Revelation. And it has no need of a sun, as itself illuminated. In all these characteristics, it appears to be a symbol for a substitute for life on earth. Now, the reason I'm saying that, because in the book of Revelation, it says in an earlier chapter that the sun and earth have passed away. So this is something that's going to be a substitute. Now, symbolically, the tree of life is aligned with the pole of the ecliptic. Now, I've talked about this in other lectures. Here you have the earth going round the sun, and you have the signs of the zodiac, 12 of them, forming a circuit. Now, we imagine, or people used to imagine that the earth was at the center and the sun was going round the earth. And you can understand why. If you're on the earth is actually going round the sun, but you're looking and you're seeing the sun framed against different signs of the zodiac. As you go around, you see it framed against different ones. So it appears to us that the sun goes through the signs of the zodiac. It's actually us who are going round the sun. And the pole of the ecliptic is the pole running through the sun of the different signs on the circle. You can see that on a sky globe. I've shown you that before. I'm not going to do it again now. Although the Earth orbits the sun, we see it as the sun moving around the Earth. In the course of the year, it passes through the 12 signs of the zodiac, as we would see it. These produce 12 fruits of the tree, one for each sign. Now, I think these 12 fruits of the zodiac are actually referring to mankind. There are 12 signs of the zodiac, and you're born under one or another of them. And that does actually affect you, your outlook, and your inclinations, you could say. And the way I put that is to say, yes, we're all the same, but you can imagine us being inside a circular room with 12 windows, and we look at life outside through, excuse me, through different windows depending on our sign of the zodiac. So anyway, the symbolic tree stands in the midst of the city of New Jerusalem, and this has 12 gates linked to the 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 tribes of Israel, and 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. So you've got 12 gates, and the sons of Israel represent the Old Testament and people who have upheld and, done the right things in Old Testament days and earned the right to come into the New Jerusalem. But there's also the 12 apostles of Jesus. And Jesus, his apostles, took the word to all the nations. So as well as the sons of Israel, you've got people from all nations who are Christians coming through these 12 gates and being allowed to settle in the garden, in the New Jerusalem, which is a fortified city, as you can see, and angels are at each gate guarding the gates, not allowing anyone in who hasn't got the right to come in. So that's like a garden, and it's like the Queen's garden, or we don't have the Queen anymore, the King's garden, Buckingham Palace. There are guards on the gates. They don't let anyone go in there. You have to be invited. The walled city is a sanctuary which takes the place of planet Earth. It protects the elect from harm while they are acclimatized to heaven. That's what I think. I might be wrong on that, but it's certainly a symbol of a protected space. And that protected space seems to be represented by the equivalent of Earth, the purified high Garden of Eden before the fall. That's what it represents. And perhaps it's, I don't know, is it a UFO? What is it? It's 1,500 miles by 1,500 miles. It's a pretty big place. But we have to wonder what it's going to be. So the sun and earth have passed away. The damned have been sent to the fiery furnace along with the beast, the false prophet, the scarlet woman of Babylon, and Satan. They've all been thrown into the lake of fire. And the New Jerusalem is like a huge cruise liner carrying the saved from earth to their new place of residence. Where this will be, we're not told. We're not really told where they go on from the New Jerusalem. Are they going to stay there for all eternity? Or is that a stopping off place? I don't know. To summarize, the river of life that flows from God's throne to the New Jerusalem is an image of the Logos stream as it pours through space. The New Jerusalem itself is a safe zone that protects the saved from the dangers outside. We can speculate that it is some kind of giant UFO, but really it seems to be a symbol for a version of the heavenly garden before the fall of Adam. The book concludes with a warning that Jesus is coming back soon. It states, "Blessed are those who wash their robes, so that they may have the right to the tree of life, and that they may enter the city by the gates. Outside are the dogs, and the sorcerers, and the sexually immoral, and murderers, and idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood." So that's pretty strong language. So if you're a sorcerer, or you're sexually immoral, or you're a murderer or an idolater, and you love and practice falsehood, you're not going to be allowed in the city. You better clean up your act, wash your robes, so that you'll be ready. If you know, we've all sinned, we've all done things we wish we hadn't later on. Well, you need to, recognize that and confess your sins. You don't necessarily have to go to the priest, not in my opinion anyway, but you do need to confess them to God and admit you're wrong and say, "I'm sorry, please forgive me." And, then if you do that, you'll be open to being reconnected back to the Logos. In other words, we have to clean up our act, stop sinning, and clean our wedding garment, which is the body of life. That's what we call the astral body, which you have an astral body, but most people it's not very developed. It needs to be cleaned and washed and strengthened. And that's your wedding garment that will enable you to come in and attend the wedding of the Lamb, which is another version of this. So another version of what we're looking at here with the New Jerusalem is the wedding feast. Only those who are already purified and therefore vibrating at a higher level will have access to the Logos stream, i.e. the tree of life. This is a warning that we, living at what is clearly the end of the age, need to take very seriously. Now is not the time to be living like a tramp with dirty clothes, dirty thoughts, and breaking the 10 Commandments. Yeah, dirty clothes. I'm not talking literally here. I'm talking about your astral body, your body of light. If it's vibrating at a low level, if it's besmirched by all the sins and the corruption and the false teachings and idolatry that you've been doing, teaching little boys they can turn into little girls, for example, and little girls can turn into little boys, that's damnable, and that will not allow you to come into the New Jerusalem if you have that opinion and you're spreading that teaching. That's just one example, and it goes without saying, if you've been raping and murdering and doing terrible things, you're not going to get in there unless you really do have remorse and show it and pay off that debt. The book concludes with the admonition that we must not change the text of the book or delete bits of it. It is this statement that is probably why we have it today. Even the church fathers, though they did not understand it, feared leaving out the book from the Bible. I'll just say that there is some surprise that this book did survive and was put into the Bible. There are other revelations that people wrote. Only John's revelation made it into the Bible. That's partly due to his authority as the last surviving apostle. But also I think people did recognize, even though they didn't understand the book, and you couldn't understand it until the time of the end. It's only because we're at the end now that I'm able to do this decoding. Other people are decoding it as well, and perhaps in different ways. But you couldn't do it at all in earlier years. You didn't have the language and you didn't have the scientific knowledge to be able to see what it was really talking about. But they did understand that it was important, so they put it in the Bible at the end as a mystery that would no doubt be understood at the end of time. And that's why we have it. And that's why I think it has been kept true, and it hasn't been altered. So, ladies and gentlemen, there we have it. The last chapter of the book of Revelation. And I do hope you're, using these lectures and have not just enjoyed them, but work with them. You'll get more and more out of them if you work with them. It's true of everything in life, isn't it? It's taken me 50 years to get to this, to be able to show you this. Don't expect to have it all just from one viewing while you're busy, having your breakfast or something at the same time. It's not going to be like that. You are going to have to think about these things and take them to heart. But above all, what I want you to understand is that Christianity is an in-depth religion. It's not just a question of going to church on a Sunday, kneeling down and having a host put on your tongue. It's not that. It's much more. And it's the whole doctrine and the whole knowledge base, every bit and more so, is impressive and important as what you'll find in any other religion. It is the most clear religion that you could be following, in my opinion, and certainly the one that's most apt for people of the West. So I recommend you read your Bible and read this book and clean your robes and then hope for the best. He's coming soon, we're told, and I believe he is coming soon into physical form. So there you have it, and I look forward to talking to you again, and we'll go into some other subjects. As I say, I'm going to do a whole series on the electric universe, but I have got a lot of other short lectures I'm going to do as well, and I'll be doing more and more lectures for people in the college who I'm going to take along the journey now. They're going to climb the mountain, I hope, not just be told traveller's tales about what it's like when you climb the mountain. It's important to do that. So thank you, and we'll speak again.